Cemeteries are part creepy and part peaceful. Maybe that just depends on who you talk to, but I find them nice places to relax and enjoy nature, all while being just a few feet away from dead bodies. People always make fun of me when I talk about how much I love going to cemeteries, but I will never, ever stop. A few weeks ago, I published the second video on this channel about haunted cemeteries. I didn't realize it at the time, but all of those cemeteries were actually in the United States. So today I thought I'd branch out a bit. Here are 3 creepy haunted cemeteries around the world. Built on a former funeral enclosure, Paris's third largest cemetery opened back in 1825. It appears to be Paris's little secret, not as known or visited as the other more famous ones like Père Lachaise or the Catacombs, both of which I've talked about on this channel. I actually came across Montmartre when researching for my Haunted Paris video, and I was happy to come back to it here. Over the years, some strange stories have crept up about Montmartre. Visitors have reported disembodied laughter and voices, as well as phantom touches. Night watchmen claim to see flickering lights and hear music coming seemingly out of nowhere. Otherworldly entities are said to scale the walls after dark, making their way into the nearby neighborhoods to haunt the living. One of the cemetery's entrance gates is believed to be a spirit doorway that ghosts can use to make their way from their world to ours. 2 notable figures buried at Montmartre are author Alexandre Dumas and Charles-Henri Sanson, the latter of whom was the executioner during the reign of Louis XVI. I guess even executioners have to die eventually. Another is singer Dalida, who died in 1987. A female figure believed to be her ghost has been seen crying near her grave. When people approach her, she vanishes into thin air. Still, her presence isn't entirely scary. People are also said to rub her grave for good luck before competitions. On a less paranormal note, the cemetery is reportedly home to quite a few stray cats. So whether you're interested in spirits or felines, maybe you should pay them a visit if you're ever in the area. Located in the Minato ward of Tokyo, Aoyama Cemetery covers approximately 64 acres and is known for its beautiful cherry blossoms. But this beauty comes with a little bit of the supernatural attached. The cemetery is home to its very own vanishing hitchhiker story. This is a trope that I've talked about several times on this channel. As the story goes, a taxi driver picks up a young woman from the cemetery at midnight. She climbs into the back seat, only to disappear sometime later, without ever being dropped off. I find it so fascinating that stories like this can be found in just about every time period and culture. Maybe we really are more alike than we think. Other reported hauntings include ghosts in traditional Japanese attire, shadowy figures walking among the headstones, a headless World War II soldier, and a woman in a white kimono, the latter of whom is said to be looking for her lost lover. The cemetery is also supposedly a popular place for younger people to do something called kimodameshi, or courage tests. These tests usually involve visiting a scary place to prove your bravery. But those who perform these tests at Aoyama are said to sometimes be pulled into another dimension. I guess the ghosts here are more malevolent than most. There is one more story associated with the cemetery that I'd like to share. The story of Hachiko the dog. Hachiko belonged to a professor named Dr. Hidesaburo Ueno, who died in 1925 when his beloved dog was just 18 months old. Every day for a decade after that, Hachiko would go to the train station where he usually met his master after work. He waited there for a while, then walked home alone. This tradition continued every day until Hachiko himself died at the age of 11. He was cremated and his ashes buried by his master. A statue was later erected for this faithful dog outside the station. This story reminds me of Greyfriars Bobby, which was a similar story from a haunted cemetery in Scotland that I shared a few months ago. While this story doesn't appear to be paranormal in nature, it was way too interesting to pass up sharing here. On the slopes of Mount Coot-tha in Brisbane sits the city's largest cemetery. Opened in 1875 and covering over 100 acres, Toowong Cemetery contains graves for quite a few European settlers to the area, including Colonel Samuel Blackall, 2nd Governor of Queensland. It's also said to be home to quite a few ghosts. One of the legends involves a hill in the cemetery known as Spook Hill. 2 sisters who died in a car accident are said to be buried on the hill. People have claimed to see a woman at the foot of the hill, dressed in 19th century clothing. And if you park your car in neutral at the bottom of the hill, it just might be pulled up, as if by some unseen force. 2 prominent people buried in the cemetery are heavyweight boxer Peter Jackson and businessman Edward McGregor. If you visit Jackson's grave by yourself at night, it's said you'll hear a bell ringing. And the statue of McGregor has been seen wandering the cemetery at dusk, along with his ghost. Another person buried here is Patrick Mayne. Mayne was an Irish immigrant who moved to Australia in 1841 and worked as a butcher. There are allegations that he made a deathbed confession to an 1848 murder and framed the man who was eventually executed for the crime. This story was never substantiated, but it has certainly fueled rumors over the years. Some say that if you visit the Mayne family crypt, you'll see a red liquid oozing from it. But one of the craziest stories of Toowong Cemetery is that of the vampire grave. As the story goes, a female murder victim's corpse was exhumed in order to get more evidence in her case. When the men showed up to her grave, the ground looked like it had already been disturbed. After reaching her corpse, they were horrified to see that the woman, who was supposed to have been dead for 20 years, was not decomposed at all, and a red liquid leaked from her mouth. When the men touched her head, it rolled to one side and she smiled at them, revealing sharp fangs. Horrified, the men reburied the woman and ran for the cemetery gates. Another version of the story says she actually met them at the gates and blocked their way out, though she did eventually move and let them leave. Of course, much like Patrick Mayne, none of these stories are substantiated. Nobody has ever suggested who the woman could have been in life, and the story does remind me a lot of the vampire graves I've covered a couple of times in the past. Maybe Australia has its own version of the story. Other hauntings at Toowong include strange lights captured in photographs, transparent figures, and a ghost called the Angel of Death who hisses at people for some reason. The cemetery holds numerous ghost tours, so if you ever find yourself vacationing in Brisbane, check it out and see for yourself. So those are all the haunted cemeteries I have for you today. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a paranormal experience at one of these places. Thanks for watching and have a creepy day.